Let's get right into it. I am shocked right now. A little bit. A little shocked, a little confused. We got Joe Rogan, and he's sitting with a gentleman named Michael Easter. Now, they're having a conversation about happiness and about what it takes for someone to be happy, what it takes for them to be happy. And then within this conversation, Joe Rogan starts talking about himself and what he's done on the podcast so far, the things that he regrets, and then how he wants to do things moving forward over time. And that's what really confused me. I'm going to let him talk about what he's saying, but Joe Rogan may have turned over a new leaf, and we may see a much different Joe Rogan than we're used to on the podcast. But the thing that worries me is, are we going to see less truth come from the podcast? And I know it's not on him to bring us the truth, but I feel like it would be a bit of a disservice to naturally stray away from it. You know? I don't know. Very, very interesting. It sounds like there's some learning and some growing going on with Rogan, which is good, which is great. But also it makes me wonder, where are things going to go? Because, if we've seen over the last 5 years, he can help quite a bit. He can help quite a bit towards waking people up, making people pay attention to certain things, changing the way people view the world or current narratives or situations that are happening. And all of that has been a net positive. And I would love to see that continue. I'd love to see that grow. So very, very interesting. Before I bring you that clip, I'm just going to bring you to the store really quick. This is IamCoachColin.com, where you can get all the Soul Not For Sale merchandise right here. First up, Soul Not For Sale, bold statement. You can make that statement with a t-shirt, hoodie, tank top, whatever you'd like, even a mug. And then we also have the Public Enemy #1 shirt. Check it on out. Google the World Economic Forum. Google "You Will Own Nothing and Be Happy." You'll see this gentleman's face. I am positive of it. And you'll understand why he's Public Enemy #1. And we also have the newest design. This is the We the People shirt. You can find that in the categories We the People, where you will find a gentleman saying, "You will own nothing and be happy." And We the People are giving him the middle finger salute he so desperately deserves. And all of us should be doing this. Not just people in America, Canada, but Europe, Africa, Mexico, Alaska, North Pole, all the scientists in the South Pole. Everybody should be giving him this salute and letting him know that we are not interested in Agenda 2030 and what it has in store for humanity. All of that's available at IamCoachColin.com. And if you want 10% off of anything you just saw, all you got to do is put in the discount code IamCoachColin. That's all capital letters. That's all one word, no spaces, and one L in the name Colin. That gets you 10% off on us. And if you've done that with us already, we truly appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I'd just like to say really quick, I am looking for guests to be on the podcast. So if you know of creators that you think vibe with this podcast, or we're on the same wavelength, you watch them and then you watch me, or you watch me and then you watch them, please let me know who they are in the comments, because I am looking for guests and I want to start reaching out to people. So please let me know. Let's get into this clip. Let's do it.
Opens up a lot of, you go, oh, there's like different ways of viewing things, and there's probably something I can learn from that. Am I going to be living in the monastery anytime soon? Like, hell no. But there's things we can learn from interacting with other people in the present who are different than us.
Yeah. Also, they're only interacting with the people that they're interacting with physically, which I think is a real issue with human beings. Mm-hmm. I mean, we were talking about dunking on people on Twitter and that kind of stuff. I don't do that. I've done it in the past. But somewhere along the line, I realized that the energy that I'm putting out, if I'm being negative, that affects me, whether I realize it or not. If I'm being mean and shitty to someone and trying to ruin their day, that affects me, whether I realize it or not. It's not good for you. It's not healthy. I don't want to do that in person. I don't want to look at a person in the eye and say mean things to them, and I don't want to look at a person on a screen and say mean things to them. I understand that there's a great pull to that because of the numbers. Because if you do dunk on someone, you know, and say, well, why don't you fucking do, and then, ah, ha, ha, and all these people put memes and all these different things, and you get 100,000 likes or whatever, I don't think that's good for you. And I don't think you really get anything out of that other than the score. It's not enhancing your life in any real way. No. You know, you're contributing to the negativity of the world. And I think, as fucking corny and as cliche as this sounds, and I've especially thought of this after psychedelic experiences, which have been some of the most profound, life-changing, and perspective-altering experiences I've ever had, that I have to think about overall good, the overall good of what I'm doing. Yeah. Like, what is overall? I think a podcast is pretty easy for the most part, because for the most part, what we're doing is having a conversation. And I think this one is very interesting to me, and so I think it's probably going to be very interesting to other people. And these subjects are very interesting, and they stimulate your mind, and I feel good about my work. I feel good about it. I feel like when people come up to me, I love your podcast, I'm like, thank you, I'm glad you enjoy it. I really like it. I like that. I think I'm doing a good thing. I think I'm putting a good thing out there, and I think so I feel good about it. If I was using my podcast to tear people apart and tear things down, and I mean, I criticize things that need to be criticized, but I try to be fair, and I try to be as overall net positive as possible. And I think I'm going to try to do that more and more as time goes on. I think I'm going to avoid even this open criticism of people that deserve it. I mean, I wonder how productive that really is. I often think about it. Like, should I just spend more time, instead of doing that, on things that I'm just fascinated with? Mm-hmm. And I think that would probably be better for me, probably create less people that are upset at me, create less people that are upset listening to it, and it's probably better overall, like the overall good of things. So it's like, if you're doing something where you're creating things, like we were talking about knives, like chef's knives, that's an overall positive thing. You are creating a thing that someone will use and they'll appreciate and enjoy. It's an overall positive exchange. And so I think the more overall positive exchanges you can create in your life, the better. And it took me a long fucking time to figure that out. It really took me until I started doing this podcast. I mean, this podcast has been this insanely educational experience to me that I didn't expect to have. I didn't expect to be educated. I expected to just do it because it was a fun thing to do. I used to like doing morning radio, and I was like, well, I'll do my own fucking thing, and it'd be kind of like doing morning radio. But then along the line, when I started having guests on, and I started considering other people's perspectives, and I started considering how I interact with those people and getting better at interacting with them and having some negative experiences and negative shows and negative interactions, I realized, like, those don't make me feel good. Those feel like shit. Like, what do I have to do to not do that and create more positive experiences? And as I've done that, the more I've done that, the better I've gotten at that, the happier I've been with what I do.
So what's the big takeaway, if you had to sum it up, from that experience?
I mean, we affect each other. And if you're affecting each other in a negative way, you're not doing overall good. But if you can affect people in a positive way, you are doing overall good. And so I try to do that. I try to do, like, when we do podcasts that are fun, I try to make them, like, if I have comics on, let's just have a good time. Like, I don't want anybody to feel bad. I want everybody to have fun. Let's have a great time. Let's laugh. I love comics in particular because we can shit on each other and it's funny. Like if a comic makes fun of me, it's funny to me too. Like, my feelings don't get hurt. It's part of what we do to each other. Like, when we're alone, like, comics in a green room are hilarious with each other. We're just always shit because we're looking for things to make fun of. Right. And you can appreciate it. It's like if you're sparring and someone hits you with a jab, like, oh, that was a good shot. You're like, I dropped my hand. Yep, thank you. You know, it's like you're getting something out of that. You're getting something out of the kind of verbal sparring, but it's all good-natured and it's all fun. And unfortunately, some people don't feel that way. Like, you can't take, like, comedian thinking and apply it to other people. Some people get, like, super upset if you dunk on them.
Yeah.
But you're not trying to be. So you have to learn how to not do that amongst regular people. And I've made those mistakes too.
Yeah.
Interesting. Not wanting to tear people down. Now, the clip's running a little long, but there's also a part soon after this where Gavin Newsom comes up. And Gavin Newsom recently said that he's worried about his son because his son started listening to Joe Rogan. And Joe even takes a very lighthearted approach to that. He brings that whole thing up that he said, that Gavin Newsom said, and instead of, laying into him like he has recently in the past few weeks, calling him a con man and whatnot, he just kind of says, you know what, that guy's job's really hard. It's really tough, And then even in the Eddie Bravo episode that played recently, he also said, Gavin Newsom, he makes sense for president. He's tall, he's handsome, good teeth, smooth talker. So I don't know. I don't know where that would lead, because that could be a real disservice, right? Like I said at the beginning of this, if you're actively avoiding talking about people who need to be spoken about, like Joe Rogan has this incredible rant where he's sitting with Matt Taibbi, and he's talking about Klaus Schwab, and he's talking about the World Economic Forum, and he's talking about how bad all that could be for society and how they're unelected and all these things, all the talking points that we all know about the World Economic Forum. But he's saying them on such a big platform that a lot of people who didn't know about it were probably like, I should look into this World Economic Forum. Like, what is this? What is this channel? Like, what's he talking about? And it's just very interesting, because what if he didn't have that whole speech? What if he didn't say all of that? What if there was a few hundreds of thousands? I mean, because he touches almost 15 million people per episode. What if all of a sudden he didn't say that, and a bunch of people didn't wake up to what they were up to? What if he doesn't touch on Russell Brand's situation whatsoever, and he doesn't bring that up at all? He doesn't try and defend Russell Brand, which he doesn't have to if he doesn't, if he thinks Russell's guilty or whatever. He doesn't have to. But what if he doesn't bring that up at all, and doesn't let people know one narrative or the other, or doesn't let them know that there could be two narratives to this whole thing? With Gavin Newsom, even, you think about that guy. I recently just saw a clip of that guy, and somebody's asking him a question about the LGBTQ. And he's like, it's such a small percent of the population. He goes, why don't we talk about climate change? That affects everybody. He goes, those kids are just trying to live. And then he walks away. And it was such an underhanded, weird thing for him to do. So there's certain things that need to be talked about with that gentleman, with the state that he's currently looking after right now. The crime that's happening there, the way it's falling apart. It's good to be graceful, or it's good to be nice and be like, hey, that's a rough job. But also there's a little bit of it where it's like, you took that job. What did you do? What happened? So if you're actively trying to avoid speaking negatively about people, you're also avoiding the truth about certain things. And it would be sad if that's the trail that the podcast started to go on, And again, I never want to tell a creator what to do. It's not my place at all, especially Joe Rogan, me. Why would I, who am I to him, But yeah, it would be, that would be a sad place to see it go, where somebody is actively avoiding talking about the hard-hitting topics of the world. Because a lot of what this podcast is, if you're an avid watcher like I am, a lot of what this is touching on current events. And it's not only talking to interesting people that do things and have done things that he's really interested in, but also getting their perspective on world issues. So now all of a sudden, when that part goes away, it'll still be good, because you're still having these fascinating conversations with people that you're really interested in. You learn about their lives. I mean, I love James Lipton, and he was somebody I used to watch so much when I was growing up. And they never really talked about world issues. It was always just about the actor, and he would just go into their life. And it was always super interesting, always. So, I mean, he could move towards that, and that would be fine. Just, it would be a disservice to what's going on in the world, because we need as many people as possible to talk about what's going on, to touch on the things, to talk about the people who are doing wrong right now. A president who seems like he's taking talking points from someone else in the background, whether it be aides or assistants or this or that. Imagine, and there's probably a lot of left-leaning channels that do this, but imagine completely ignoring any cognitive decline that gentleman has. Imagine completely ignoring the way AOC acts and acts out and the ridiculous things she says. Imagine ignoring what's happening in the country because you don't want to talk badly about the politicians who have a really tough time. That would be sad. Because then, and Joe has said this to Eddie Bravo at one point when they were having a discussion that got a little heated. He said, Eddie, you should watch what you're saying because right now you're influencing millions of people. There's millions of people watching. And if you avoid all of those things that I just brought up, then I would have to say the same thing to him. You're influencing millions of people. If you act like there's nothing wrong, they'll conduct themselves like nothing's wrong. And that's not really where we need people to be. And again, I can't put it all on him, but here we are. It's very interesting to think about. I'm not sure. It doesn't matter how I feel about it, honestly. I'm a watcher like you are, but I also do this, so I'll take it upon myself. I don't ever think that I'm going to stop speaking about the truth. I want to have interesting conversations, but I avidly want to know what people's perspectives are about what's going on in the world. I want to get the pulse of people, whether they be creative or working class or whatever, what have you. I want to know how they feel about the things that are happening. I want to know if they know about the World Economic Forum. I want to know if they've heard about the Bilderberg Group. Maybe it's lucky for me that interests me. Maybe I'm much younger than Joe Rogan and that will change over time. I'm not sure, but very interesting to think about. I was telling my wife, I think on another episode, I was saying like 10 years ago, I was watching Joe Rogan and I had the thought, I was like, this guy's going to be like Rush Limbaugh. By the time he's 60, he's going to be just like Rush Limbaugh. And at the time, what I knew about Rush Limbaugh was basically what you saw on The Simpsons, and he's yelling at the camera and he's saying a bunch of things. And and now Joe Rogan's almost 60 and I'm receiving at least weekly emails and messages from people telling me how I remind them of Rush Limbaugh. It's funny how things change. Oh man, you never know what's going to change in the world. But let me know what you think in the comments. I know that there's two schools of thought. There could be just he's learning and growing and just wants things to be different for himself because why not? You're making like $100 million a year. Every time you say something wild or have someone on the podcast say something wild, CNN, ABC, MSNBC, they make these hit pieces on him. My wife was saying it. She's like, maybe he just wants to coast. And that's not a bad thing. You're 56. One of your daughters is probably like in her 30s by now. You have two younger girls. Every time you do something crazy, it probably affects their life. Who knows what happens when he goes home to his wife? Maybe she doesn't like all this stuff. You don't know how it's impacting his family. So maybe it's like, I want to pull back from all this. I just want to have good conversations. Howard Stern says he wants everything he's ever done destroyed when he passes away. I mean, look how much Howard Stern's changed. He was the one that paved the way. I mean, after Lenny Bruce, it's Howard Stern paving the way, getting fines like crazy, just pushing forward for all of us. And now look how much he's changed. I don't know. Maybe that's just what happens. Maybe you just do what's best for your family at a certain point because you're older. And it's not about you anymore when you have kids, especially when they're growing up. You want them to grow up comfortable. You want them to grow up not having to deal with your mistakes and the things that you say on a daily basis because you're on such a large platform. And then there's the other school of thought that the CIA has pulled Joe aside and has had a conversation with him about getting a little too close to the sun. Oh, man, I'm not in that camp. I think just as a creator, especially when you're in the position like he is, he just sits back and keeps doing what he's doing. Spotify pays him, I think it's in the neighborhood of $100 million a year. I think that's what the contract was. Not 100%, but I think that's what it was. With all the businesses he owns, along with the Spotify deal, he's worth about $400 million. A lot of people don't know that about Joe. Like maybe even $500 million, because there's some things I don't know. But the ones I do know, it's worth quite a bit of money. Maybe he's just like, I'm just going to wait it out. I'll be a billionaire by the time I'm 60, 65. And, you know, my kids will be taken care of, and I can just do stand-up and just work on that and just have fun with my friends. It's not out of the question. But either way, let me know what you think in the comments about this whole thing that he just said. Where do you think the podcast is going to be going from here on out? And if it worries you, or if it excites you, or if it makes you angry, let me know. Other than that, subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Hit that like button if you haven't hit that like button. And other than that, I'm out.